Welcome back to Steaming Pile with Lauren and Tucker. I am Lauren,
And I am Tucker.
and today I wanted to talk about cringe.
Cringe.
Like cringe has gotten kind of like a retrospective discourse. Like people are starting to take the approach of like there is no cringe, you're just being mean. Which to some extent, yes, that is true. I think teenagers, especially young teenagers, like 12 to 14-year-olds, they are being cringe, but people also are being mean. But I have a pretty high cringe tolerance, except when it comes to like pickup artist video compilations. They make me die inside.
Well, yeah, because that's it's kind of the ultimate cringe when you think about it, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it's cringe that leads to dying alone.
Well, and my thing of it is there's I don't, there's something so sad about all of it
Mm.
because they're clearly trying very hard, but then at the end of the day, it's like I don't even know that they care about what they're going for. Like they're not actually looking to date a woman. That's not the thing. And I can't watch too many videos about like pickup artists and that whole subculture too long, or it raises my blood pressure because it's like I don't understand.
You don't understand? Okay, so are we talking about what pickup artists do, or just cringe in general? What do we want to tackle here?
Ooh, yeah, we do want to keep it on cringe. Just because I don't understand a certain kind of cringe doesn't mean that,
Okay.
yeah. Because, like, there are good videos about cringe.
Mm-hmm.
And they break down how there's, like, self cringe, where it's like, that's just growth.
Yeah.
And that's a good kind of cringe.
Yes.
But then there's, like, cringe as shame that prevents you from growing because you aren't aware of your, like, social faux pas.
So the good kind of cringe is the one where you feel embarrassed.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
think embarrassment, because, like, cringe is just the physical action.
Mm. Okay.
Yes.
And that's a very interesting distinction. Whenever I think of cringe, I guess I don't think to delineate it that way because, well, I guess when it comes to yourself, you can only experience the good kind of cringe. It's impossible to experience the bad kind of
Yes.
cringe
Yeah.
because you're not
Yeah.
self-aware enough to do so.
Yeah. I think it's
Um,
like self cringe and social cringe. And social cringe is where you're cringing at someone else.
yeah, and that can be the bad kind of cringe. In
Oh,
fact,
every
it's
time.
it's worse and more delicious when it's the bad kind of cringe. I think because they're just you're looking at someone and you're like, how can you not know what is happening? What
Yeah.
right? And so you get secondhand embarrassment,
Yes.
and that is just tasty. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
No, I got a real healthy dose of secondhand cringe. This guy was on a beach and I think he was there with his family, and he walked up to this group of girls to tell them that their bathing suits were inappropriate. And I died because he tried to like use religious justification, and I'm like, that's not how that works.
What?
And it was even worse because he made like a follow up after, like he became the main character of the universe for a day.
Hmm.
And he tried to like back it up with like, I struggled with pornography. And so seeing that like triggered flashbacks. And I'm like, that's fine. But also remove yourself from the situation.
Yeah, that's I've so he spent a day at the center of the universe. What was this?
Well, I say like main character, the center of the universe. It's like the only goal you should have when you log into Twitter is to not be the main character.
Mm.
Because that's who everyone's talking about. I think it ended up being, I think the girls recorded a TikTok because he was
Ah,
like, yeah, because he just came up to him, singled them out instead of anyone else on a beach,
mm-hmm.
and was like, your bathing suits are inappropriate. And I'm like,
That's huh. All right.
yeah,
That's
it's
yeah.
it's it's like your value system. You can't just transfer that to strangers.
No, right. I mean, well, it's not that you it's not that you can't, and it's not that people don't. It's that you shouldn't.
Yeah. Because where he's even coming from of like, this righteous anger he described, I'm like, this whole correction thing only works with someone who values your opinion to begin with.
Correct.
And yeah, I think it is that lack of self-awareness where they think they're doing the right thing. That's always the case, is everyone thinks they're doing the right thing.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
It just backfires horribly.
Yeah, you see that all the time. People think they're doing the right thing, but it just ends up being the bad kind of delicious r/public freak out kind of cringe, and it just oh you're familiar.
Yeah, I occasionally see those cross posted on a boring dystopia. Because especially if it's like mask or vaccine related public freakouts, those will get shifted over. Yeah.
Oh,
it's just because
but you think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and you're clearly having a bad day, and every day you wake up and you ask, what am I willing to put up with?
Yeah.
And sometimes people hit the threshold of not that.
Yeah. I don't know. It's because I guess I kind of can key into it. The things I do because I think they're the right thing. And I wonder if there even is a difference, right, between a public freak out and not freaking out, but still doing anything in public.
Yeah.
Beyond the obnoxiousness of it. It's because you think you're doing the right thing.
Yes.
Which is, and that's kind of an interesting way to look at it. I'm having these thoughts in real time.
Yeah. Well, and I sympathize too with like your worst moment being what defines you then. Because I've had weeks where I've cried daily over nothing. And if any of those happened in public, that's who I am forever.
Right.
And so I get having, just you're at the end of your rope and you snap, and regardless of what the reason is, if that just becomes who you're known as, that's it. It's not a world where just the people who are there, like they go home, they tell their spouse, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's you're on all of the talk shows, you're on all the news circuits, you're a meme. And
so I guess then, because you can't really call that believing you're right. Excuse me? You can't really call that just, believing you're doing the right thing, because there's something extra when it goes, when it gets to that point, right?
Oh, yeah.
When that, being defined as your worst moment. Yeah.
Yeah. The believing you're right happens a lot of the times before the cameras turn on.
And the cameras only turn on when you believe it so much that you're willing to have that moment.
Yeah.
Huh.
Because there could be a belief that there's no power and you've lost that power, and therefore you have to assert that and defend it. And so I think having like a secure sense of just your place in the universe in general and what you should bother controlling versus what you just need to let go of.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have an easier time of that than others. Both for brain chemistry reasons and just for general personality reasons.
Yeah, it's probably far more complicated than I'm thinking of it as.
See, every single situation is, but it's so easy to be just like, let's cringe together.
Yeah, well, that's because I think first off, I think in order for something to be, let's cringe together worthy, there has to be a critical mass of people who all agree that what this one person thought was the right thing is the wrong thing. And we talk about Reddit a lot. That's very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but that's I don't know. It's just very, Reddit is a hive mind.
Oh yeah. Right.
And it's multiple hive minds, but the ones that frequent the public freak out
Yeah.
right? It's more or less an echo chamber. So what is interesting, and that's what's interesting about that. You don't
Oh yeah.
you really only see the public freakouts. I wonder if there is an equal, maybe not an equal number of public freakouts in the opposite direction of where you see, just in general, you take all the public freakouts you've seen. Do you think it's possible? And then further, do you think it's likely that the opposite of every public freakout exists? Someone believing that they're correct on the other side of the spectrum and freaking out because of it.
So freaking out on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Is that like in retaliation?
No, that's believing the exact opposite of what is being published.
Oh.
Right? So you see someone freaking out because they have to wear a mask. What's the exact opposite of that? Someone freaking out because, well, not so much that they, yeah, because they don't have to wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen one of those yet, but I'll bet you they exist. But I'll
Oh,
bet you
they have to.
But I'll bet you they don't get traction because of that critical mass.
Yes.
There you go. That's like 3 PhDs worth of sociology. Boom.
We did it.
Boom. But you get what I'm saying, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we create, in some cases, we create a person.
How do you mean?
And we base it on like the freak out. Like we assume X number of things about the person based on what they're freaking out about and based on just their appearance in general. Now, sometimes those are correct.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was some woman who was tearing up a Target display of masks. And it was like she was QAnon, she was X and Y, and people were like, yeah, that tracks.
And this goes back to something you mentioned earlier, how you're now defined by your worst moment.
Yeah.
And this, I know we've talked about this maybe 5 episodes ago. The video about how music in reality television shows is used to... I actually watched that video again today because I have a problem. But the term is reification, where you boil something down to just one thing.
Yeah.
Right? And in the musical tropes, you're basically trying to define someone by one thing, even though they are obviously as complicated as anyone else, right?
Yeah.
And the same is true for the animal documentaries, but we've talked about this.
Yeah.
But this applies without music as well, right?
Yes.
Where we are, I don't know if I'm using the term reification correctly here because I don't fully understand what it means. But are we? We're definitely reifying these people to the point where they are just that one thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And even though it's funny, cringe, and the critical mass believes the exact opposite of what they believe, it's still unfair to a degree that they are reified as this batshit crazy person.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, because nuance isn't funny.
No, of course not.
It's what makes things funny is if you simplify it down to the base parts. Because a lot of comedians will take a very abstract concept and they'll break it down into super simple pieces and make fun of those simple pieces.
Sure.
Because nuance requires like higher thinking, empathy, and we don't have time.
No one has time.
No one has time.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the name of the video delivery platform that only had 10-minute shows?
Oh, Quibi.
Quibi. That's what they thought. They thought they could get away with compressing down plot lines and whatnot in 10 minutes to reify a story, to take away all of its nuance. Now, I'll admit that I've noticed my attention span getting shorter over time. I prefer 30-minute television shows over hour-long television shows. I just came off of watching an episode of Sopranos. That seemed like an eternity. It was less than an hour. But I wonder why it failed. Because it seems to address the need for good content like television shows. We're in a golden age of television. For it to be bingeable. I don't know. Is there just like this canyon of content length? Excuse me, content length that isn't digestible, in that it's too long for just a quick little thing and too short for it to be useful. You have 30-minute television shows that you can just tear through. On Netflix, and then like short little TikToks and what have you, that you can tear through an entire trending page. I don't know how the app works, but I wonder if A, it's if there's a gap in content length, or if B, the content was just really bad. And if that's the answer, because I don't know.
I don't know. I've watched a couple videos on the failure of Quibi. I think both Amanda the Jedi and Swell Entertainment had videos about why the platform failed. Because like Amanda reviewed some of the content, and there weren't bad shows. The only show I can really remember is a show that I think Dan Harmon and his partner wrote, or just his partner wrote, but it was about them. Where Anna Kendrick was dating like an older guy in entertainment, and he had a sex doll, and she and the sex doll became friends. That was the only show I can remember from the platform. But part of it was the platform itself was just unusable.
Oh yeah?
Like the switching from portrait to landscape was garbage. I don't think they even had really good landscape viewing to begin with, or like the ratios didn't change well. There was no way to share clips with people on any platform, so you couldn't be like, oh, this was a good episode, look at this clip from this episode.
Interesting.
I think it also wasn't compatible with like Apple TV and stuff, so you could only watch it on your phone.
That's bad. Yeah.
And then they expected people to pay for it. And they kind of just coasted on like the early sign-ins, or like the sign up for 90 days or something. They had a long free period. And then when that free period ended, people just left en masse.
Yeah. So, okay, here we go. Let's relate it back. Is the concept of Quibi cringe? The concept, the business, the idea that they tried to push, is that cringe?
I think corporations tend to be cringe with their new ideas, even if they end up taking off. But Quibi, yes, I think was kind of cringe, just because it seemed like at every turn, it was like you've severely misunderstood the market. Like, because I think they took, people watch YouTube on their phones, or they watch Netflix on their phones when they're commuting or going to the bathroom or something.
Sure.
We need a platform that does that. But also we need the content to just be pieces of movies at a time. Like, just let people pause and come back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In that sense, yeah, I completely agree with you.
It's just kind of a hubris thing.
And I think that's why the market rejected it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Jeffrey Katzenberg has succeeded in market transitions before when he jumped to DreamWorks and made Shrek. Like, I think, Jeffrey Katzenberg, petty asshole. That's who he is. So it's not that he can't make good decisions, but that was just like completely missed the mark.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah. That makes sense, right? I think it's very interesting to equate failed businesses with cringe. Because that's kind of what it is. And I don't know if it's the good kind or the bad kind, but it certainly is. When it's a socially relevant product that people outright attack as being, who needs this? This is right. Something like the Juicero, Quibi. I just had it on top of my tongue. At the top of my tongue. The tip of my tongue. What's an example of something that the market outright refused to accept because it was so Who is this for? And people felt pandered to.
Ooh. Yeah.
It's right on the tip of my tongue.
I'll tell you one that recently happened that I felt justified in laughing at. So Victoria's Secret, right?
Yep.
They tailor their products to women built like their models. And they've been very open about like, we're not going to let people who aren't that size buy our products. We don't care. We don't want to make our products plus size. We don't want to do that. And so companies like Aerie stepped up and they're like, well, we'll make those sizes. And then Victoria's Secret tried to pivot and be like, but wait, no, now we have a whole line now. And like their stocks plummeted because people didn't care.
That's okay. Yeah. That's certainly cringe, but I feel like it's a completely different class of corporate incident.
It depends on who the failure is. If we see the failure as like the person doing the failing, if we see them as pathetic, it becomes cringe. If we see the failure as like a comeuppance or just funny in general, it's not cringe. It becomes hilarious, like Fire Festival. From an influencer's perspective who was invited to it, it was cringe because you've showed up to this nothing. But for people who couldn't afford to go, who think influencers are dumb, that was hilarious. That was a beautiful failure.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
So okay. I think there's a measure of how many pegs is someone taken down that we feel good about.
Okay. This could also tie into... Do you remember when just the whole Imagine thing, right? At the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, that's a good example, though.
That was perhaps one of the cringest things to have ever happened in the history of human history, okay? Now, who decided that was a good idea? That was Gal Gadot's idea, right?
I think it was.
Oh, good thing she's hot. But the thing is, like, were they ever... they were knocked down a couple pegs, but did it matter in the end?
No. But it was still cringe.
That's true.
That's what it is if we don't feel like they received the backlash, we have to cringe because we're like, we don't know how they all reacted to seeing people be like, this is the most tone deaf, obnoxious thing ever.
Yeah.
Whereas with Firefest, we saw all of that play out. We saw the responses. And so we could be like, yes, justice. And like with Victoria's Secret, we saw the stock plummet. So we were like, yes, justice.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess the same thing could be said. Another example I thought of was Kim Kardashian's birthday party.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the same could be said about that. Trying to think of an example for which this doesn't apply. I'm having a hard time. Kevin Spacey.
Ooh.
Okay. Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
Louis C.K. If you want a less extreme example. Okay.
Sure.
Louis C.K. came out and said, yup, and I'm sorry. Okay. Now, was that cringe? Based on the definition we've set forth, he was knocked down several $1 million worth of pegs. A movie, which that sounded real creepy just from the synopsis.
Yeah.
Like, based on our definition, would you consider that cringe?
No.
Okay.
To me, like, I don't cringe when I think about, like, his response to it. I still just cringe when I think about the scenarios themselves.
That's fair.
Like every time I think it, because I'm like, why? Where are your, like, barriers where your thoughts have to come to a crossroad and there's a guard that says, stop. Don't do it.
So this would be the bad kind of cringe. Because at least at the time he was not self-aware.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And Kevin Spacey, I think, falls into the bad kind of cringe because, and his may be even worse because I think he understands the gravity of what he did.
Mhm.
And I would argue his was worse asterisks than Louis C.K.'s.
Oh, yes. Yeah. With the asterisks, of course it was worse.
Because I'm sure there are going to be people who are like, actually, those are the same. And I'm like, well, okay, then that
Well.
covers that. But no, because Kevin Spacey just seems to not get it. And it's like, you've proven yourself. We know. Stop.
Yeah.
And the fact that he just keeps trying is like, go to jail, dude.
Oh, what about okay. Very cringe. This is definitely cringe. Perhaps it is contestable that what Kevin Spacey did is cringe or not. His 2 Christmas videos thereafter, those were cringe. The bad kind,
Yes,
not self-aware.
yes.
Read the room, pal. Right? Like, nobody
Yeah.
likes you.
No
When
one
when
does.
Bill Cosby walked out of the courthouse and said, "Hey, hey, hey," right?
No.
It's like, dude,
It's still,
dude.
yeah. Dude.
yikes. Read the world. That's
Yeah. I
now's not
also
the time.
feel that way about OJ Simpson's Twitter account. I'll occasionally see the videos from that.
He named his book "If I Did It," but you can't see the word "if."
Yeah.
Okay, but that one's actually kind of funny. That one has self-awareness, so that's the good kind of
It's
cringe.
good
I would say.
marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll give you that
Oh
one,
my
OJ.
That's the only one.
Oh my god. Oh man.
No, the Imagine video is a good example of cringe, just in general. Another example of cringe that's just fascinating for its persistence. So Jack's films, like 6 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe at this point, he had the like Jack to the Future video. that People
Yep.
have continued to just relentlessly mock him for.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how he feels about it personally. Sometimes I'll read like the comments and how people interact with him, and I'm like, sometimes that has to just feel mean.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if he looks at that sometimes and he's like, yeah, that was pretty cringe. Worth the check, but pretty cringe.
Have you seen Jack to the Future too?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. Where he just walks up and punches himself, end of Deadpool style.
Yeah, that's. I think that's how he feels about it.
Yeah.
So I would argue that it's the good kind of cringe.
Yeah.
And when it
And
comes to-
obviously he's in, or go ahead.
When it comes to big marketing and ads, you don't really have a lot of vision over your creative
Yeah.
vision, right? Especially for someone like that. It was a Google phone, right? And it was the augmented reality thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Tango. Were they using Jack's films to advertise Tango? Because that was
I thought
disappointing.
it was,
The whole
I thought it was
technology.
just the phone.
Oh, maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt there, because when you are, at least back then, when you are doing something for an ad, it's very strict. You see people doing sponsored reads for YouTube now, and while still pending approval, you are allowed to do things the way you want to, more or less. A great example of this, internet comment etiquette.
Yeah.
But back then, what was that, in like 2000, early 10s?
Yeah.
I don't think that was.
Yeah. Unless you were advertising your own product, it was, everyone had the same script for everything.
Yep. Is it cringe that he pushes the board game?
I go back and forth on that.
Okay.
Because I understand that for longevity, YouTubers have to diversify what products they're selling, because videos could perform well or poorly, but you need another consistent stream.
Yes.
And he at least seems genuinely interested in it.
Sure.
I honestly feel more cringe when he brings up the podcast.
Okay, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, because like I get it. If YouTubing is your full-time job, you have more time to do that. but every time like individual channels, because obviously we're more efficient and we've combined 2 channels into ours, but like every channel starts a podcast when the content they're making anyway is podcast content.
Okay. To that end, do you consider YouTubers that have shifted to streaming and then repost edited streams to their channel as their only means of content to fall in that same category?
That's a good question. I'm not a fan of the Twitch format.
Okay.
So I tend to appreciate when content creators will put edited compilations on their YouTube channel. I watch Jimmy here that way, and he just does You Laugh, You Lose, which are super basic content, but I don't have time to watch a 2.5 hour to 3 hour stream.
Sure.
But I have time to watch a 20-minute video once a week.
Okay, that's fair.
I will say I'm the big trend right now is like opening Pokemon cards or any kind of cards on stream. That I'm starting to be like, that's not, I don't appreciate it. I'm sure for some it's like cool and it's like gambling, but for me it seems really weird.
Yeah, I can't key into that either, but I can see the appeal.
Yeah. Because I think my big gripe with it, and kids today don't necessarily buy them to trade and play with, but I'm like, so you're taking this thing that was made for children and you are going above and beyond to buy out shelves of it at Target or Walmart or wherever and just open the cards until you get one that justifies the purchase. Like, what happens to the other cards?
Right.
Do they just get thrown out?
Yeah, and it's nuts that the cards have value at all.
Yeah.
It's like Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's agreed upon. Yeah.
It's real cringe, bro. I kind of want to look up the dictionary, or I want to see. I'll bet you there's a Wikipedia page on just the word cringe. I want to see what it says because.
Ooh. Yeah.
Cringe Wikipedia. What if I could spell? That would be cool. Maybe someday, huh? Okay, to cringe is to shrink or coil in embarrassment. We have cultural cringe, the feeling of inferiority about one's own culture. Cringe comedy, a comedy genre centered on socially awkward situations. The Cringe, a U.S. rock band. Or cringe pop, a genre of pop music.
There's a whole genre of music?
Okay, we'll click on that one. Cringe pop is a genre of pop music written to be deliberately and unintentionally cringeworthy. History. Rebecca Black's song Friday is usually credited as the birth of the genre. The song, which was released in 2011, has blah, blah, blah. Black was soon followed by Tayyar Shah, a Pakistani musician and businessman. His music video Angel went viral. His first music, cringe pop is, okay. Examples. Okay. So this is to music as the room is to cinema. Right. Whether it was intentional or not, it's still cringe. There you go. Okay. So that's what cringe pop is. It's a very short article.
Sure.
Cultural cringe or cringe comedy, or we can look up cringe or cringeworthy in the Wiktionary, the free dictionary.
Oh,
take your pick.
fun.
Pick your own adventure. We're on a roll.
I mean, I like cringe comedy.
Okay.
Because it's the best. Because I think it's because it's fictional situations, and I know that everyone knows that it's just fun. So, like, so much of like Vice Principals is cringe comedy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of sitcoms tend to rely on cringe comedy to good and bad effects. I think some of iDubbbz's Primo content does cringe comedy very well.
Yeah. That's, yeah. I'm going to click on cultural cringe because I don't understand what that could possibly be. Okay. Here we go. Cultural cringe. In cultural studies and social, yeah, good talk. Anthropology is an internalized inferiority complex that causes people in a country to dismiss their own culture as inferior to the cultures of other countries. It is closely related to the concept of colonial mentality and is often linked with the display of anti-intellectual attitudes towards thinkers, scientists, and artists who originate from a colony or former colony. It can also be manifested in individuals in the form of cultural alienation.
That is fascinating.
Let's see. I'm going to scroll down to the United States section. If there even
Yeah.
is one. There isn't one. Are you sure?
See, because I think of cultural cringe about my own country all the time.
It
I
lists-
see it everywhere.
It lists Australia, Brazil, Canada, New Zealand, Scotland. And Scotland is like one sentence. Scottish First Minister Jack McConnell claimed Scottish cringe in relation to Scotland's disdain for free enterprise. That's it. That's the tweet.
That's fascinating that America doesn't have a section because I feel like people cringe about America all the time, and it's especially Americans that do it.
Oh, interesting. So just skimming through the Australia one of the examples it gives is convict stain. For several generations
Ooh,
following the
yeah.
cessation of penal transportation, many Australians felt a sense of shame about being descended from convicts, and many did not even attempt to investigate their family's origins for fear of finding conflicts in their lineage. Yeah, this has American history shame written all over it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Is there another word for it?
The article may just be written by an American who doesn't have American cultural cringe.
I'm looking in the see also section just to see if there's anything.
Yeah. Because what's fascinating is like the sense of inferiority, which I feel a lot of like neoliberal Americans have, because they're like, oh, American culture doesn't exist. We steal it from other cultures. There are other countries that have a more rich, more beautiful country, or more rich and more beautiful culture. But the fact that it bends towards anti-intellectualism as well, which tends to be seen in more like red states. So that's a fascinating combination.
Okay, I'm just opening tabs left and right here. What is oikophobia? An aversion to the home environment.
Waco-phobia?
Um,
Like Waco, Texas?
OIKO. I don't know how to actually
Oh.
say it. It's an aversion to a home environment or abnormal fear of one's home. Okay, that's
Oh.
interesting. I've opened three other
Yeah.
tabs here. The first one is romantic racism, because that just sounds weird. Romantic racism is a form of racism in which members of a dominant group project their fantasies onto members of oppressed groups. Okay, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, I see that all the time. Yeah.
Okay, this one. Okay, never mind about that one. It's exactly what I thought it was. Self-hatred is the personal self-loathing or hatred of oneself or low self-esteem, which may lead to self-harm. In social groups, that's what I want. Okay, we got African Americans, Catholics, Jews, and LGBT plus individuals. The last two have their own articles. There you go. Self-hating Jew and internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
We're going down the rabbit hole. Interesting.
This is a more educational rabbit hole that we fell down than when we were looking up like the evil Teletubbies.
Yeah, but we could probably circle this back somehow. Just give us a moment. We have like 20 minutes left of the podcast. We can figure it out. I'm trying to. Okay, I'm going to follow the African American hole and see if I almost said black hole, and see if we end up at what the American section of that original article should have said. But I don't think this is it. This is just an article about stereotypes of African Americans.
And there are many.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's not it. And Chrome closed. Did I reach the end of the rainbow? What did I start on?
Cultural cringe.
Cultural cringe. All right, let's go back to cultural cringe.
Because, yeah, I mean, every time I'm on like a boring dystopia, all of the comments are just full of people who are embarrassed to be Americans. And sometimes even in world news, it's full of just people embarrassed to be American. Which in some ways is just like, it's still being self-centered to a degree because you're still obsessed with your status as an American and you're obsessed with what America is and means.
Let's see. colonial mentality is the internalized attitude of ethnic or cultural inferiority felt by people as a result of colonization, i.e. them being colonized as another group. Now, that's the opposite of what...
Yeah.
That's the opposite. Okay, let's
Yeah.
go back. Anti-intellectual attitudes. Anti-intellectualism is hostility to and mistrust of intellect, intellectuals, and intellectualism, commonly expressed as deprecation of education and philosophy and the dismissal of art, literature, and science as impractical, politically motivated, and even contemptible human pursuits.
Yes.
Is there...
Because with that,
Son of
it's
a
always
bitch.
a feeling of like... Because anytime people are anti-intellectual, it's because they think that they know... They want to be in control of something.
Yeah.
Because if there are people that they're just supposed to trust, and they're like, well, we're not going to trust them because we don't know them. We don't know what they stand for. We don't... Whether they're a part of the elite. And the elite are the enemy, which is true, but also...
And in doing so, they are doing what they believe is right and resulting in cringy outbursts. We're on to something. Here we go. So there's... let's see, under the section heading academic anti-intellectualism, there's a whole big United States thing here. Let's scroll down to more current times, 20th to 21st centuries. Political polarization in the U.S. has long favored the rise of anti-intellectualism by each political party, Republican and Democrat, to undermine the credibility of the other party with the middle class. In 1912, New Jersey Governor Woodrow Wilson, heard of him, described the battle. I can't do a... I don't know what he sounded like.
Oh, he just sounded like an asshole.
What kind?
I
need to get into character.
Snobbish asshole.
What
Snobbish
I fear...
Yes. Perfect, nailed it.
What I fear is a government of experts. God forbid that, in a democratic country, we should resign the task and give the government over to experts. What are we for if we are to be scientifically taken care of by a small number of gentlemen who are only men who understand the job?
This is Woodrow Wilson?
That's Woodrow Wilson.
That's so stupid. The man had a PhD.
Did he?
And he only got us into World War I specifically to boss everyone around at the Paris Peace Conference because he thought he knew best.
Academic. Oh, yeah. He was a professor at Johns Hopkins.
Yeah. Anti-intellectual. What a loser. I hate the man.
That was
ridiculous.
Yeah. God forbid that in a democratic country we should resign the task and give the government over to experts. Because, yeah, what did they know? Okay.
We're all just a bunch of losers. Like, even if anyone is an expert, they still have to care about what they're being an expert in or what they're being an expert for. Because if they're just, like, showing up and clogging in and clogging out, it doesn't matter if they're an expert.
Exactly. There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. Oh, and there has always been, excuse me. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. Isaac Asimov.
Oh.
A lot of people, they're name dropping in this Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So next we have to have Noam Chomsky. He's probably next.
They're quotes, but I don't... Who is that by? Dane Clausen. And then that's it. Okay. Yeah, I would imagine Chomsky has something to say about it, but it's not here.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's, again, it's a fundamental mistrust, and it's a feeling like people are talking down to you, that you don't have control over what you should be able to do, because people, and we see it all the time. It's not, what do the facts say? How do those fit into what I currently believe? Do I need to change? It's, here's what I say, and I'll find the experts that believe the same way I do, and whose results will funnel that. So sometimes it's not anti-intellectualism, because people who believe in, like, essential oils and whatever junk Alex Jones sells on his website, people who believe in that stuff, they'll find experts who believe in it.
Yeah.
And they'll use it to support it.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's here we go. In the U.S. English slang, egghead is an epithet used to refer to intellectuals or people considered out of touch with ordinary people and lacking in realism, common sense, sexual interests, etc. on account of their intellectual interests. It was part of a widespread anti-informed social propaganda effort that insisted that credentialed intellectuals were not the only smart people, but that serious human intelligence could be found widespread among ordinary people regardless of deprivation of information.
Did that word originate during the McCarthy era? Like
Adlai Stevenson was called an egghead by Richard Nixon during the 1952 presidential race.
52! I said 51. All right. Let's go. It makes sense that Richard Nixon called him... Wait. Richard Nixon called him that, correct? It wasn't Stephen Adlai to him?
Correct. Of course. Okay. No, of course it wasn't.
No, okay, but like that makes sense. Richard Nixon had such a complex about this. So he was not the oldest son, but like his older brother, I think, died. It's been a while since I've read his biographies, but he wanted to go to Harvard and he couldn't afford to do it. So he had to go to a different school. He had to go to one that was actually in California for his undergrad. And so when he got to like politics and you have people like the Kennedys or just super wealthy, well-to-do people in politics, it drove him nuts because he was like, I worked hard for what I have. And the fact that these people can just like waltz in and be seen as intellectual, it drove him crazy. And so I'm not surprised that he called him an egghead.
Yep. It was used by Bill Clinton advisor Paul Begala in the 2008 presidential campaign to describe Senator Barack Obama's supporters when he said, Obama can't win with just the eggheads and African Americans. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, I have expected
article,
that. Yeah. I have expected that to also be used to describe Al Gore during the like Bush-Gore election.
Whoa. There's a very long word in Russian culture that means the same thing. I know I can say it because we're smart and it's like the N-word, but it's Obrazovanshchina.
Okay, so is it like spelled out in Romanization or is it in Russian characters? Okay.
I got both. I'm not even gonna try it again. But yeah, it's basically the same word. Category of people with superficial education who lack the higher ethics of an educated person. Just kidding. It's the opposite. Okay, well. Anyway, that's egghead.
That's so funny.
I still can't believe the cultural cringe doesn't have a section on America because it seems to fit so well.
It does, yeah. And maybe it's just because I grew up in America and I'm surrounded by Americans and I frequently read opinions by Americans. Yeah.
But it might be, and there's a somewhat interesting dichotomy. There are people outside the country who want nothing more than to come to the country because even in its current state, they still think it's the best place on earth. Maybe relatively speaking to where they are, it is. But from the inside out, and I guess there are people who are willing to look past the history, right? How America came to be, what has happened in the past 200 odd years. I get it. So there. I mean, there's definitely cringe, but I would argue that it's the good kind of cringe. It's the self-aware kind of cringe, because it's not like we did slavery and it's like we don't talk about it anymore, right?
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah.
Right? As a country, we're like, yeah, let's not do that again. There are a couple of laws to that effect, I think. But it's just, right? Like, I would argue that kind of cultural cringe is maybe all kind of cultural cringe. Is there something that happened that the originating culture recognizes but doesn't like question or feel weird about maybe the entirety of North Korea.
Um,
Maybe the Communist Party of China. Maybe what's
Turkey and the Armenian genocide. They don't talk about that.
no, they do not. Nobody does.
No.
I keep forgetting that happened. But yes. Turns out there was more than one genocide. History teachers. But yeah, so yeah. So there are so there is bad kinds of cultural cringe. Given our definition of what good and bad cringe is, which is probably a misnomer at this point because we've bastardized that to hell and back. But
yeah.
But sticking with the nomenclature, yeah, I guess all of those examples would be considered bad, not self-aware, but everyone else knows it cringe.
Yeah.
Feed your people, Kim Jong.
Yeah. No, because it's hard to gauge nationally what is considered like bad American cringe. Because if we know about it, I assume that means we're talking about it in some capacity.
Okay.
Because like the thing in Canada about all the children in unmarked graves, I don't know if nationally that's a thing they're talking about.
Okay.
Because that was bad.
Let's bring it back home. Asian internment camps in the Second World War.
Yes.
Okay. No one talks about it. It takes up a page in the history book because, it happened. But just the fact I saw the look on your face. Does that look on your face right there make it good cringe?
I mean, I'm aware of it and I know it was bad, but it seems like when we talk about FDR, it's only people who disagree with him ideologically that bring up that was bad or bring it up at all.
Yeah.
Because if you agree with his policies, you want to like hype up that those were good, but it's like, but at the same time, they just indiscriminately threw Asian Americans into internment camps just because.
Right. But at that point, if you're just using that to attack FDR, then it's not that you quite care. I'm sorry?
Well, that too, exactly.
Yeah, but
if you're only bringing it up.
But that's what you just said, right? If you're using it as a weapon and not really recognizing in a cringe way, which sound really bad. Imprisoning all the Haitians was super cringe. No, I mean it was. Don't get me wrong.
It was,
but the Holocaust was so cringe.
Oh no.
It was. But they get it, so it's good cringe, which sounds worse out of context. I get it. I'm the one that edits these, so I will have to listen to this again. But I don't even remember the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, it's weaponizing things that other people did because you disagree with them. It doesn't mean you care about the thing that happened. Right.
I don't know enough about FDR and his policies. I did at one point, but I don't remember the entire ramifications of what the New Deal brought. But if on the whole, and I would, just knowing what I know now in my thoroughly uninformed opinion, on the whole, if what he did was more good than bad, he brought us out of the Great Depression, right? Then the attacking him with internment camps, is that the same kind of cringe? I'm bringing it all the way back. Is that the same kind of cringe as labeling someone who has a public freakout, and that is their worst moment? Undoubtedly, Asian internment camps is probably, I don't know for sure, well, the atomic bomb maybe also, the worst thing that FDR did. Okay, the two worst things there were two bombs. 3 worst things that FDR did.
I mean, the bombs happened under Truman, so.
Oh, that's right. Never mind then. Okay, so back to just the one thing. I forgot that was Truman. Okay.
Yeah.
Just the one thing, right? He probably did some other bad things, but this is the only one that's coming to mind right now, and this is our podcast. Shut up. If you label him as you that's the bad thing he did, and it's cringe. Bad cringe because we don't talk about it. And bad cringe because he wasn't self-aware of what he was doing on a social scale. Obviously, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know his character. Maybe he thought it was bad, but necessary for national security. Either way, I would call that bad cringe, because it's on some level he was unaware. I'm really dragging this question out. Would you consider it to be similar to the public freakout examples of bad cringe we discussed earlier? Go.
It is an example of a public freakout in that if it happened today, there would be a critical mass that says it's bad. And at the time, obviously people said it was bad, but the critical mass hadn't been reached. So it's an aged public freakout cringe.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, something that had more real-time reaction. Vietnam.
Ooh. Was Vietnam cringe?
Well, yes, but what kind of cringe? And can we equate it to the kind of cringe that is experienced, felt, and projected onto public freakouts?
I mean, that's an interesting point, because there were what you could argue were public freakouts that I don't think people would necessarily disagree with. Like I think it was a Buddhist monk who set himself on fire. Or just people in general would commit self-immolation in protest. That's kind of a public freakout.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. And so well,
you're working on two separate levels of meta here, right? The public freakouts we think about and the go-to in the current era is people who refuse to wear masks. That is in response to a government action. In the broadest terms. They haven't acted really, but in a sense, right? Vietnam was a government action. Self-immolation is underneath that. So in that sense, I would consider those, as horrible as it sounds, I would consider those roughly equivalent, right? It is a reaction and protest to the cringe of the government.
Yes.
Is that... You seem lost in thought.
Well, no, because it does come down to what is the critical mass that makes it cringe.
Oh, yeah. And then a lot of people were against Vietnam, and a lot of people are cool with, wearing masks.
Yeah.
And that's the critical mass.
That's because among, gung-ho war hawks, I'm sure the setting yourself on fire is seen as, would have been seen as cringe in those circles, because they're like, this was a necessary endeavor. Now, I personally think it was cringe for the United States government to be like, you know what's worth it? Burning down a whole country to stick it to a very small communist government.
Okay. And that you just brought up something that we talked about earlier again. The opposite reaction. You didn't hear, or maybe you did, but not in as loud a volume, the people who were cool with Vietnam, the people who wanted Vietnam, who were on the warpath, they had an opposite reaction to the freakout, but not as loud because there wasn't so many. The critical mass hadn't been reached.
Yeah, and I think Vietnam is a sticky thing where at the time I don't know what the critical mass really was. I don't know what the percentages of people in favor versus not in favor was.
That's fair. And I don't really know enough about the all. I think for us, because we weren't alive during Vietnam, but we have the privilege of watching a whole bunch of anti-war movies and a lot of anti-war propaganda that has survived. It's possible that the two of us think that the sentiment was more anti-war than it actually was.
True.
Right, you see something like Full Metal Jacket. You see something like Apocalypse Now.
Now.
Yeah. You see movies like these, and you're thinking like, "Wow, this must be MASH." I think counts.
Yeah.
Right? You,
It was came out during Vietnam. It was about Korea, but about Vietnam.
okay, all right. But you see these things, and they're A, popular, and B, have this anti-war sentiment. Off the top of my head, not that I'm very well versed, I cannot think of a pro-Vietnam work of art. Can you?
And that may be the other thing too, is the idea of it being a work of art to be pro-war. Can art be pro-war
At that
without
point,
just being propaganda?
I think it would be labeled propaganda either way,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate, but likely true.
Yeah.
Okay. Look at the... Okay. There was, at the beginning, right, 20 years ago, at the beginning, there was a lot of pro-war sentiment after the towers fell,
Oh yeah.
right?
So much.
I don't know a lot about the Vietnam War. I don't think there was any big inciting incident like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. Was there? You probably know more about this than I do. Was there something like that?
For Vietnam, it's sticky because like the French were in Vietnam since like the 50s, and Eisenhower was like, you know what, the French need our help. And
With what?
with keeping the communist dominoes from falling across all of like Southeastern Asia.
Okay, so that's it. That's why we were there.
Yeah, they wanted to contain communism.
Okay. That seems far more tame compared to inciting incidents like, Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well,
And with Pearl Harbor there was actually throughout the war there was a lot of pro-war propaganda.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't just propaganda. I would wager to say that there was a whole lot of art. There are a lot of World War II movies. There are a lot of episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because with World War II, I think it's like, oh yeah, fight Nazis, fight for freedom.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a noble cause. And then Vietnam happened, and we were like, so what are we doing here exactly? Because it seems like
Right.
you're sending a lot of guys over there. They're getting terrorized by people who have had their country invaded, and they're charging up a hill. It's costing dozens of lives from their platoon each time, and then they get to the top of the hill, and the next day they just give up that position.
Yeah.
So what was the point?
Yeah. And
it's guerrilla warfare, and they come home, and there's a mixture of like anti-war sentiments because people forgot the guys who were drafted were not the government.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't help with PTSD. And nobody knew what PTSD really meant. So
it's true. Yeah. And I think with this most recent war, you kind of saw both sides of the coin. It started out, let's go get them, right? Because they attacked us here.
yeah.
Much like Pearl Harbor in World War II. And so we're like, oh yeah, woo. And then as time went on, it became more of a Vietnam-like conflict. Like, what are we doing here? What is...
And the thing...
And then we got Bin Laden, and it's like, okay...
Now what?
That didn't really do much, so what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing with the Afghanistan war that's different from, like, Vietnam is, at least with Vietnam, to my knowledge, we haven't had, like, a report come out that says, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. Because at least for some reason in Vietnam it sounded like there was a modicum of a plan. But with Afghanistan, no plan. Donald Rumsfeld just wants some oil.
It makes cars go.
We have to protect the poppy fields. Yeah. Oh, what was I thinking of? I don't know. But yeah, the Vietnam War was cringe.
Yes, it was. That's that's just such a great sentence to have constructed and said out loud. The Vietnam War was such cringe.
Cringe.
Say it like Woodrow Wilson. The Vietnam War was such cringe.
I once read a book that was How to Fight Presidents. And for fighting Woodrow Wilson, their advice was like, just beat him up. He's sickly and old, but then remember that he was a racist and sexist, so beat him up.
Just do it. Just do it. Yeah.
Just really beat up all presidents. I'm okay with beating up all presidents.
I was at a concert a few days ago, and that was the sentiment of the lead guy.
Awesome.
He said he hates all presidents, and then he listed them, and then he stopped. And he's like, "I'll give Jimmy Carter a pass." I'm like,
"What?" The only president I will give a pass is James Garfield, because in my mind he was chill.
Oh, he didn't go back that far. He stopped at Jimmy Carter.
Oh.
So maybe if he did some reading, he would also give Garfield a pass.
And I'd give Coolidge a pass. Those are like the two guys that I'm like, they can stay. They're all right.
Yeah.
Every other president, beat him up. They should have been bullied more. Our big two takeaways. Vietnam War was cringe. Presidents should be bullied. And those messages are brought to you by tonight's sponsor.
Oh, this is perfect. All right. This episode of Steaming Pile is brought to you by Toshiba. Now you might be wondering, how did we get Toshiba to sponsor a podcast like this? And the answer is we didn't. We're actually sponsored by the League of Liars. The League of Liars is a non-profit group of people who lie. And that's it. They're also totally for-profit, so don't tell the IRS. They've been sliding under the radar for a very, very long time now, and it's probably how they're able to afford the sponsor segment. It says their organization is thousands strong, although that's also not true, likely, and it's probably just a few people in the group chat. But you can sign up for the League of Liars at www.goatsy. Okay, never mind. This is just lies on top of lies. I wonder if this organization even exists. The money for the ad was paid with Bitcoin, so I have no idea who would be behind this. It's a good meme, though. It's a good meme.
It's good.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Good for them. Anyone who lies to the IRS is fine in my book. I've seen what the government does with my money. I don't trust that.
It's just more cringe. They take your money.
More cringe.
And it's just so much cringe.
The real question will be, will we be able to sit through this video when we put it up?
God, I'm just going to be sitting here editing it with just a gun to my temple, just like, no more, please. So much cringe about cringe about cringe.
And that's content.
Yay.
This has been Steaming Pile with Lauren and Tucker. I've been Lauren.
And I have been Tucker.
And we'll see you all next time.